Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to a Q&A video. We have questions today about Bitcoin, questions about the altcoin market that I've gathered from you guys. I posted right here in my community section, ask me a question about the market that you would like to see answered in an upcoming video. And you guys left your questions. I've picked out about 6 or 7 of them. I think the ones I've picked out are the most useful to the most broad range of people. And I've left timestamps down below. So if you're not interested in specific questions and you are interested in other ones, you can skip through the video. But I'd actually suggest sticking around for all of them because I've actually selected the ones that I think are useful, just broadly speaking. Questions here about when to buy, questions about a realistic top price for Ethereum in this cycle, questions about how early Bitcoin can top out in this cycle without breaking the 4-year cycle, questions about similarities of this altcoin rally versus prior altcoin rallies, whether or not the current Bitcoin move can be considered a typical bull flag, whether or not Bitcoin dominance has topped and therefore altcoin season has, broadly speaking, begun, and questions about dollar cost averaging in and out of the market. So wide range of topics to cover, obviously incredibly useful video. Please stick around guys and check out the Bitunix Exchange before we get into it. A lot of people ask me what exchange I use as a trader. I use the Bitunix Exchange and I don't have a contract with them. I haven't signed anything with them. I don't work for them. I advertise them on my own accord. With my referral link down below, you can get a 15% trading fee discount permanently attached to your account, as well as up to 8,000 USDT in rewards just by signing up with my link down below. Why would you sign up? Well, it's global. It's non-KYC. It's never been hacked before. It's got all of the functions and pairs that you would expect for a major exchange. For that reason, I use it. And I implore you to consider using it as well. Sign up with my link to help out the channel, help out yourself. Cheers. Got a question here from Paul, who's waiting to buy altcoins. He's waiting for Bitcoin to break outwards before he makes a move on altcoins. And he's basically wondering whether or not he's played this the right way, wondering whether or not he should have accumulated at lower prices, or whether or not maybe he should even just buy now before the breakout. He wants me to go over the benefits of waiting for confirmation of big moves before buying. And obviously just give my opinion on whether you should wait now or buy now. So I think it's important to note specifically on the topic of the altcoin market that altcoins actually are not moving that dramatically yet. Now, people might disagree with that, but I encourage you to look at the data. We look at Bitcoin since April. Bitcoin has moved upwards about 66% since April. Ethereum, and this is where the confusion comes in, has moved upwards about 180% since April. So Ethereum's tripled Bitcoin's performance. But the broader altcoin market, right? The altcoin market minus Bitcoin, minus Ethereum, so just everything but Bitcoin and Ethereum, has, just like Bitcoin, only moved upwards about 65% since April. So actually, the broader altcoin market is performing on par with Bitcoin. And the only way you'd ever consider even getting into altcoins in the first place, considering they're dramatically higher risk than Bitcoin to the downside, is if they are outperforming Bitcoin. And they're not doing that currently. And they haven't been doing that for the past 3 months. So altcoins right now are actually not favorable investments. I know that sounds silly because of how a bit Ethereum is moving, but it's simply the truth. Right now we are in an Ethereum dominated market. Ethereum is tripling the performance of Bitcoin and of altcoins. Altcoins have not even started moving yet. So you could make an argument that, well, okay, if Ethereum's moving, that means that altcoins will move soon. And I agree with that. I think we will see an altcoin season. I think that altcoins will move soon. But I also think we'll need a trigger before that occurs, right? Market dynamics don't just change at random. You need a major shift for the market dynamics to shift. And so for us to go from an Ethereum season to an altcoin season, which is what we expect to happen, we need to see something in the market fundamentally change. And that thing could be a Bitcoin breakout above its resistance level and the next Bitcoin leg. Because even in an altcoin dominated or an Ethereum dominated market, it is generally still Bitcoin that leads the way. Okay, so I think that honestly, and of course I can't give you direct financial advice. These are just my opinions, and regardless of the words I use, I'm not responsible for anything you do, of course. But in my view, I don't think there's any particular rush into specific altcoins. Now, with that said, if you wanted to take a gander and you wanted to take a stab here and buy altcoins now, it wouldn't be that illogical, because generally after an Ethereum season, you do see an altcoin season. That's the next kind of big thing on the food chain when it comes to how money flows in cryptocurrency. But you'd need to be doing it with tight stop losses in play and with a clear kind of exit strategy if it doesn't work out. But rest assured, you haven't actually missed anything at all on a broader scale. Now, obviously, specific altcoins, you can highlight specific examples of what you've missed. Some altcoins have done really well, but on a generalized scale, as measured by the total three, in comparison to Bitcoin and Ethereum, actually, if you bought altcoins 3 months ago, they would have performed exactly the same as your Bitcoin bags performed. It's really Ethereum that's done very well, and that's why I was clearly shouting for Ethereum buys down here in April as Bitcoin reversed to the upside, because Ethereum always moves first before the broader altcoin market. But there's really nothing to be concerned about, Paul. You haven't missed anything yet. It really is up to you as to whether you wait for the big shift or try to front run it. If you do try to front run it, just make sure to have a exit plan in mind. Speaking of Ethereum, we have a question here. What do you think a realistic top for Ethereum will be this cycle? Well, unfortunately, we don't have the same kind of macro trends we have for Bitcoin on Ethereum. And actually, we don't really have many trends on Bitcoin to begin with. And Bitcoin's what we have the most data on. So, I don't even know what the Bitcoin top price would be. I've had speculations. It could be anywhere between 130K and, up to 170K. But the fact that I'm so broad in that means that it's very difficult to even nail that down. So, God knows what Ethereum could go to. But if we're just being very speculative, I did originally way back make predictions or observations that it could reach anywhere between 8,000 and 9,000. That made a lot of sense at the time, about a year ago when I was talking about it, because we had broader macro trends on Ethereum. We had a 5-step pattern on Ethereum. Step 1 was topping out. Step 2 was the dead cat bounce. Step 3 was forming macro resistance. Step 4 was breaking it. And Step 5 was breaking a prior all-time high. That kind of 5-step pattern was being copied. You can see the numbers I'm drawing out here. It was being copied up until Step 4. And we didn't actually end up breaking all-time highs. We still haven't. So that pattern, which I was relying on quite heavily, was broken. And, Ethereum and altcoins in general got very much wrecked in 2024 for various reasons, which I've covered in this channel before. Right now, we have nothing really, no real indication of where Ethereum could go, other than just very broad speculative measurements. Now, I can do that if you want to, but I'll have to base it off of Bitcoin. At this part of the cycle, as we've seen in the last 3 months in an Ethereum season, Ethereum generally 3x's the performance of Bitcoin. Now, it was a slightly different multiple in the last cycle at the same period of time, but this time it's looking like it's about a 3x performance of Ethereum against Bitcoin. If Bitcoin hypothetically kept running for another 3 months to a 4-year cycle top of late this year, let's just say hypothetically it could get to something like 150,000, maybe. Again, we don't know. There's no anything really pointing to that. It's just highly speculative. Let's say we see one more macro leg. The macro legs in this part of the cycle have generally been, let's just see from here, from the neckline breakout to the peak, about 60%. With diminishing returns, let's just assume it's 40%. Okay, so we see a 40% breakout from the recent high. We go to 165,000, highly speculative. If we did that on Bitcoin, that's a 40% move. We multiply that by 3 on Ethereum, that's going to be 120% from the current price region. That would take Ethereum to about 8,000. So actually, interestingly, we get to the same level I was talking about before of 8,000 and 9,000. We could also just go through and do this. We can see the measurement from top to top on Ethereum in price cycles. It was about a 230% difference between the top in 2018 and the top in 2021. The top between Bitcoin in 2018 and 2021 was 230% as well. And if Bitcoin was to go to, I don't know, let's just say 150, 160, let's say 155, that would be 120%. So it'd be about halving the prior cycle's high to high returns. If we did the same thing on Ethereum, given the fact that the percentage difference between the 2018 top and the 2021 top was the same, just in the case of Bitcoin, we go upwards from the all-time high about 120%, and therefore Ethereum would go to about 11,000. So I don't know, maybe between 8,000 and 11,000 makes sense. But again, it's so speculative. It's very difficult to actually tell. What we do know is that Ethereum can and does move very rapidly towards the end of the cycle, and that's what it's been doing for the last 3 months. I see no reason as to why that won't continue. We've got 3 months left in the cycle if the 4-year cycle plays out. And that's a big if as well, but let's just assume it does. It's the only thing we have to go off. Ethereum's moved upwards in 3 months, 177%. If it can replicate that exact move in the next 3 months of 177%, it takes us to around 10,000. So I am still kind of optimistic for that 8,000 to 11,000 region, but it is pretty baseless. And I'm remaining extremely vigilant. Cautiously optimistic is the way I describe myself on the Ethereum chart right now. What is the earliest Bitcoin can top out and not break the cycle? Unfortunately, just like the last question, it's pretty speculative to answer that. The 4-year cycle is a date range trend on Bitcoin, an umbrella trend, a kind of trend that encompasses many other micro trends. And it's not based on price. It doesn't matter what price Bitcoin goes to. It could top out here at 118,000. As long as it happens within the date range trend, it's all good. It's all valid. So it's really a question of dates. If Bitcoin tops out way too early, we can clearly see it was an early top. We can clearly see the cycle has been deviated from. If it tops out way too late, we can clearly see it was a late top. We can clearly see the cycle has been deviated from. In my personal view, we have about a 30-day room for error, given the fact that there is one singular micro trend within the 4-year cycle that kind of does assume we're plus or minusing 30 days between cycles. So we could go, in my view, as late as something like late November or as early as something like late September. Realistically, if we topped out in mid-September, 14 days before my acceptable date range trend, am I really going to throw out the whole cycle? No, I'm not. So it's actually very difficult to clearly state when the 4-year cycle would be broken based on a date range perspective, just because it's so big. There's so many micro trends involved, and there's nothing really saying that these trends can't be gradually adjusted over time. But I think there is a very, very acceptable 30-day room for error from that late October prediction. And if it's anywhere between that 60-day period between late September and late November, we are very much within the 4-year cycle's bounds. Anything other than that, and it'd start to raise eyebrows, but it wouldn't immediately, suggest to me that the 4-year cycle is completely gone and we should throw it in the bin. Unfortunately, there's just no clear, defined, objective way to know when the 4-year cycle is broken unless there is a clear date range deviation. So if the cycle clearly extends, into 2026 and it's still going, yeah, okay, the 4-year cycle is broken. If the cycle, if we never see another peak on Bitcoin, if $120,000 back here in June was actually the top, yeah, okay, the 4-year cycle is broken. That's way too early. But if we push into September, November, October, it all gets a little bit murky. I just don't think there's any way to avoid that, unfortunately. But I do know this, if it's not a clear break, if we're not clearly deviating, we probably shouldn't be throwing out the 4-year cycle altogether, because, the fact that you'd have to be asking whether it's broken or not means it's probably not broken. It's probably just being slightly altered. What are some of the similarities and differences of this rally versus the altcoin rally last year? I just want to clarify what I said before. And if you watch the start of this video, you'd know we're not seeing an altcoin rally right now in any real way. Like, of course, objectively, altcoins are rising, but they're not rising any faster than Bitcoin is rising. Again, we're seeing, about a 70% move from April on Bitcoin, seeing the exact same percentage move from April on altcoins. Again, it's really Ethereum that is moving right now, not the altcoin market. The good news is Ethereum front runs the altcoin market. So when you see Ethereum move, you can expect altcoins to move soon. We just haven't got there yet. Now, if you compare that to what we saw in November for a very brief period of time, we had a trend on the Bitcoin dominance chart, which is the best way to measure whether an altcoin season is happening, really, that basically said in the last 2 cycles, altcoin season lasted 320 days. That existed in 2017. It existed in 2021. We were expecting it to occur again, but we saw some deviations for various reasons in regards to how slowly Bitcoin was moving and how boring Bitcoin was being, and that not leading to the hype that was necessary in the altcoin market. But if the altcoin season was going to last 320 days again, from the peak of Bitcoin dominance to the end of the cycle as per the date range trend of the 4-year cycle, it would have had to start in November. And we actually did see it start in November. We saw about a month worth of an altcoin season in November 2024. And it was an actual altcoin season where altcoins genuinely did move aggressively, more so than Ethereum and way more so than Bitcoin. And that, in my view, was the kind of, the failed attempt at a regular 4-year cycle altcoin season trend developing. A regular 4-year cycle altcoin season trend in which we see a 320-day altcoin season from the peak of Bitcoin dominance to the end of the cycle. But unfortunately, due to independent market variables like Bitcoin just consolidating endlessly for 8 months and no hype being in the market, it didn't work out. And now we've kind of deviated. We're forming a new altcoin structure and something entirely new is happening. But the comparison, like your question says, between this altcoin rally and the altcoin rally we saw in November last year is that the altcoin rally we saw in November last year was very expected from a cyclical level. It made a lot of sense. And right now we're actually not even seeing an altcoin rally. So there's really no comparison. However, there are hopes for an altcoin rally here because Ethereum is moving so aggressively and that is typically a sign that altcoin moves are to come, especially if Bitcoin keeps it up. So kind of an invalid question in a lot of ways, but hopefully I've shed some light on the situation. Can the current BTC move be considered a bull flag? Yes, it can, and I think it probably is. Maybe not strictly speaking, but in a lot of ways it holds similarities. We know for a fact, and I mean, you should know this by now. If you don't, we had a resistance line on Bitcoin coming backwards from 2017, and it was forming, resistance for many, many years on Bitcoin through all-time highs in 2021, and also on multiple occasions in 2024 and earlier this year. We've broken above that level now, and we're actually consolidating right on top of it. That's an 8-year-long level, which is now support. I've roughly drawn it here, but you can see where I'm getting at. And essentially, it kind of sits over here if we actually draw it properly. Essentially, we do have some sort of structure forming. It's difficult to say what it is. Could be a descending wedge formation even. Some sort of structure forming right here. If I draw it very zoomed out, it looks like a descending wedge. If we zoom in, it gets a little bit more choppy, but you get the gist here. There is a structure clearly forming on top of the support, which is being offered by this line, which is previously resistance, which does look like a bullish structure, which is happening within a macro bull market. And we're happening while the market just has a lot of strength and hyper engagement. So I do think you can probably call this some sort of bull flag. You can't be strict about it, but yes, I think you're correct to do so. Now, obviously, what does that entail? It entails the fact that if we break out of the bull flag and we break the all-time high once more, we're in a good position to continue with another sharp macro move. And it also means if we break below the bull flag, maybe we need to abandon ship to some extent, especially if we break below something like 110,000, which is the next closest support below this bull flag, because fake outs can occur here, but a fake out doesn't break below something like 110,000 in this kind of structure. That's not a fake out, that's a breakdown. Was the drop on Bitcoin dominance again a fake out? Do we need to go higher on the Bitcoin dominance chart? Now, okay, I said before that we're not in an altcoin season right now because altcoins, broadly speaking, are not outperforming Bitcoin. It's only Ethereum that is. So you might think, okay, that means we go higher on Bitcoin dominance, but I actually do think the Bitcoin dominance top is probably in, because even though we're not in an altcoin season, we are in an Ethereum season, and the next logical step from an Ethereum season is always an altcoin season. And I do think, therefore, the Bitcoin dominance chart will keep decreasing. And the only way I see that not happening is if we see a dramatic change to the current macro structure, like a Bitcoin breakdown or something like that. So I do think the Bitcoin dominance top is probably in. Next question here. I'm using a strategy of which I myself don't know what I think of. Every Saturday, I take out 2% of my cryptocurrency. Last cycle, I fumbled so hard, and this is my method. What do you think? So he's selling 2% every week in order to secure profits. Now, I'll say this off the rip. There's absolutely nothing wrong with securing profits, no matter what you do and no matter how you do it. It's always good to take profit. The last thing you want is to get destroyed. However, I am, unfortunately, and to the dismay of a lot of people, fundamentally against dollar cost averaging in most capacities. I think that dollar cost averaging on a blind basis, like I will sell at this date no matter what, I will buy at this date no matter what, every week, every month, whatever it may be, I think that is lazy, personally. And I know a lot of people don't like when I say that. A lot of people don't have the time I have to look at the charts all day and all that, but I think it is lazy. I think it's very easy, in my view. I know it seems hard sometimes, but it doesn't take too long, especially considering the fact you're literally willing to put thousands of dollars into the market, money that could be very valuable to you. It doesn't take too long to learn when a macro breakdown occurs. In my view, if you want a really reductive way of trading on a macro scale, literally just learn how levels work. Okay, if we drop below 110,000, Bitcoin looks bad on a macro scale. That's when you sell. If we break above 124,000, Bitcoin looks good on a macro scale. That's when you buy again. If you just do basic macro analysis of macro breakdown zones and macro breakout zones, you can get a relatively good idea of where the market is going with a relatively good ratio of success. I think that is more efficient, better, less lazy, and more reactive than just buying every week, no matter the price, especially if you're considering holding very, very long term as well. But look, I can't sit here and say, someone taking profits every week is a bad thing. It's never bad to take profits. Do whatever you will and what makes you comfortable. I think there's better ways to go about it, but that's me as someone who has a lot more time than you and a lot more skill than you. I suppose it just comes back to what I said before. I feel like if you're willing to put so much money in the market and risk your money, you should be willing to learn at least a basic level of TA. That makes sense to me, but I understand everyone's got different opinions and circumstances. Guys, hopefully you found use in that video. Covered a lot of topics there, and I think it was quite good. So if you found use in it, Let me know if you didn't. Let me know what you want me to fix in the next video. I'm willing to take any criticisms or recommendations. Also, check out the Bitunix Exchange if you're interested. A lot of people ask me what exchange I use as a trader. I use the Bitunix Exchange, and I don't have a contract with them. I haven't signed anything with them. I don't work for them. I advertise them on my own accord. With my referral link down below, you can get a 15% trading fee discount permanently attached to your account, as well as up to 8,000 USDT in rewards just by signing up with my link down below. Why would you sign up? Well, it's global, it's non-KYC, it's never been hacked before, it's got all the functions and pairs that you would expect for a major exchange. For that reason, I use it. And I implore you to consider using it as well. Sign up with my link to help out the channel, help out yourself. Cheers.